Hello, everybody. It's 4:01 on Monday, February 9. We'll call to order the Board of Directors meeting for the Holland Board of Public Works. Janet, can we have a roll call, please?
Maloof.
Here.
Lilly.
Here.
Engbers. Lynn.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Couch. Corbin. Here. Van Beek.
Here.
We have a quorum. Would the board like to take action on the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
That's a motion by Maloof, second by Lilly. Any further discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. At this time, we'll open our meeting up to communications from the audience. We provide an opportunity for anybody who would like to address the board, the opportunity to do so, requesting you state your name and address for the record and adhere to a 5-minute speaking limit. Any communications from the audience today? Hearing none, we'll close communications from the audience and turn it over to the general manager for the consent agenda.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. The consent agenda this afternoon comprises 3 items. First item, 4A, is a request to approve the minutes of the regular meeting on January 12, 2026, and the study session on January 26, 2026. Item 4B is a request to approve the enclosed lease agreements with Consumers Energy pending approvals to form by the City Attorney's Office. And these easements are to allow for the installation of fiber telecommunications to the BPW's natural gas interconnection facilities down in Overijssel. Item 4C is a request to approve a bill of sale from Jubilee Ministries, transferring ownership of sanitary sewer infrastructure subject to approvals to form by the City Attorney's Office. And this is for area over between, I think, Cleveland and 20th Street area that's being developed for homes in that area.
Any questions from the board on the consent items?
Move that we accept the consent items as presented.
Second.
It's a motion by Lilly, second by Maloof. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is passed. Major project updates.
All right, excited to say that we have 2 closeout memos this afternoon. We'll get started with those. The first one here is for the Bricado Lift Station rehabilitation, and Brian Ritchie is here to present that. So Brian, we're up to the microphone again. If it's not currently lit there, you can hit the button to make sure that the microphone's on.
Looks like it's on. Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everybody. I have this project, Bricado. We have another one right after this, so you're hearing from me for a little bit here. So Bricado Lift Station was out there for a while, approved back in August of 24, was delayed for various reasons. Finally got this one done this past fall, though. This is replacing a 1979, was the original construction of this one. That's just at the end of Bricado Court, services a few homes, and this force main brings it out to the South Shore force main that ties in with the rest of the force main that comes along South Shore Drive there. So this station was the last of the pneumatic ejector pumps that we had in the system, and was a replacement with the standard kind of that we've been doing for most of our stations for submersible stations. So this one being a little bit different in that we were able to use a fiberglass that came prefabricated fiberglass structure with the wet well and valve structure together, made for easier construction with the small footprint that was there in the smaller station that it is, only servicing a few homes, and had some cost savings associated with it as well. So this also brought the controls above ground, again, another standard that we've been doing across our system, and added a generator connection to be able to use in case of emergency. So this came in under budget at $459,705 were the final construction costs. And then there was some engineering costs, again, at budget. And then there were a few miscellaneous items for SCADA upgrades with our UIS vendor to get this station back up and live with our SCADA network. And then some landscaping upgrades to keep the neighbors happy with the station in the form that it's in. So yeah, if you look at some of the photos here, this shows the station as it's being demoed. Well, basically already demoed, and they're down to kind of the bottom of what was the dry can structure there. And then you can kind of see the smaller structure behind it, which is the bypass connection that was also added as part of this. And if you keep going, you can see a good shot here. This is the new station as they're bringing it in. That's the prefabricated fiberglass structure that has the wet well where the pumps go. That's the bigger one of the two. And then the secondary structure that's tied with it is the valve structure where the force main's coming out of the station. And then the next one shows that being placed in, or that already placed in the ground, new force main coming out around it, and connected into the existing force main. And then you kind of see a final shot here of the station. There's your top of the structure, the control panel, some safety bollards there to make sure nobody's running into this. And eventually that will, in the springtime, have some arborvitae trees that kind of line it to help blend it in a little bit more, again, for the folks in the neighborhood there. And I think there's one last photo that shows the kind of zoomed out view of that with the asphalt patch. Any questions?
Did the previous station have a backup to it for power or not?
It did not. It did not. So if in the event of a failure with the very small amount of flow that it has, we would have used the Vector truck to keep up with that flow, right? So it only, just to give you an example, it only runs, I think, on average 3 times a day. So very, very, very minimal flow. I think there's a total of 10 connections, residential connections, that are flowing into this station. But now we have the option of both to be able to use the Vector and generator if we needed to. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Now we got the second one available for you here. Is also one that we discussed a little bit during the study session. Show you the new technique of the pipe bursting project, but that's the closeout memo is also included. So Brian, I'll let you walk through that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So this, as Dave mentioned, was our first pipe bursting project that was successful. We replaced 1,100 feet of 12-inch cast iron main. So this was over off of 40th, off of Graf Skip between 40th and Jasmine. And this area was once the lower pressure district and is in what would be an area that has concerns with low pressure. So Heritage Meadows and kind of the folks along that stretch in Grass Skip, we've had several complaints of lower pressure over the years. That last actually fall of 24, we did some valve work in the intersection to try to bring them onto high pressure. Unfortunately, in doing so, the increased pressure caused a number of breaks right thereafter. So we got them back onto low pressure, knowing we needed to do these improvements before we can get them onto the higher pressure elevated system. So this captured that work, and these folks are now on the elevated system. Again, this was considered one of the options, whereas we would typically do open cut replacement. Instead, we decided to, weigh the options of pipe bursting and lining, and this one really was lined up to be a great candidate for pipe bursting. So it brought in new HDPE pipe, again, size on size, so 12-inch main replacing 12-inch main, and then there were a few galvanized surfaces that were also replaced as part of this project. So the construction cost for this one is the only cost you're seeing here, since this was engineered in-house. Not a ton of engineering involved, more or less kind of laying out this is where the pipe is. We're looking at all the as-built, we're looking at what the soils are, and with the number of breaks we had there, we had a very good idea of what the soils were. So we came in under budget at $387,805, with the project being bid at $397,550. So if you look at some of the photos here, This first one is showing the bursting head, which is actually to the inside of the pipe there, but you can see the tracer wires well taped on there, and that's basically on the other end of it. You would have the bursting head that's being pulled through from the other end of the project, and bursting the pipe as it's pulling this new HDPE pipe here that you see. And the next photo kind of gives you an idea of what that bursting looks like in a snapshot view there. So that's actually a gas service that it's going underneath, that they hydro-excavated to make sure that we were getting underneath it. Semco was there to help make sure that it was pulled up a little bit. We actually had 2 of these, so again, gives you a great view. That's the actual bursting head itself being pulled through, and the fractured pipe is the existing cast iron pipe that was being split off to the side. And then this is the tie-in point at the north end of the project. That valve there on the very top of the picture is now the isolation valve that separates the 2 pressure zones. So that's a new valve as well. Again, you can kind of see the tie-in from HDPE to the valve itself, the ductile valve, and then that's where again it ties into the existing going to the north. And then another shot here showing a couple of the service taps. So they tap these with saddle taps and running new copper to tie in the new services back to the folks to get them back in service. I think that was it. Yeah. Any questions on that?
Looks good, Brian.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Brian, very
Thank you.
much. Yeah,
Thank you.
a couple of really great projects came in under budget there, and so it was nice to see that come to completion in your list as well. It's available for you online, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it today. Just letting you know that a couple things of note. About 240 additional customers to the fiber, Holland City Fiber this month versus where we were last year, so continuing to make some progress there, although, again, the heart of the winter that we're in, we're not doing a lot of those underground connections to the home at this point. That's kind of in a stall as we wait for a little bit warmer weather, but work does continue on the passings network, and we're trying to make sure that we come into alignment with the schedule expectations there by the end of the fiscal year. We have closeouts I think are pending for 17th Street Lift Station, Southwest Heights, and then the electrical upgrades at the water reclamation facility, so stay tuned for those over the next couple months. And then tonight we're also going to hear a little bit more detail about a couple projects in here that are unit number 7, the major overhaul, and also the UV disinfection. So we'll hear a little bit more at that point. And I think Janet either is pointing to the ceiling or has a question on one of the two. So yeah.
Just a brief reminder to everybody, I can't always hear your voice coming through, so perhaps you're not hitting your mic on button. The voice is not really transferring well, so be sure to hit your mic button when you talk.
Was that for me? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. All right, because it sounds pretty good here, but I mean, yeah, you never know. So that's what we wanted to really discuss. I think the other thing that probably of note in the lineup, you probably also saw, maybe if you were looking at that, the digester project. We do have a date for voluntary mediation coming up mid-December for the parties to get together and talk about the resolution of the conveyance related issues to the egg. So that'll be an attempt to try to reach some resolution with everybody there. So that just want to make a note of that. That really concludes the highlights I had in the major project review today, unless anybody had anything they wanted to bring up.
Hearing none, we'll move into the regular agenda items.
All right. First regular agenda item, it's actually getting involved in, I think if you look at our capital plan for the next several years, we're starting to look at substation transformers. And these are the bigger transformers that reside in these key locations around our electric distribution area. They are reaching end of life in some cases. And so we have a proactive approach to dealing with those in our longer range capital plan. Tonight, you have one of those in front of you for consideration. And Steve Brynsma is here to walk through that. It's for our James Street substation. So Steve, I'll let you take it from there.
All right, thanks, Dave. Back in December, I came with a recommendation to approve a circuit switcher for the James Street substation as well. The circuit switcher is on the 138 kV side of the transformer that protects it in case of a fault or anything like that when we have to take that transformer offline. This afternoon, I'm here to bring the recommendation of that transformer itself. The circuit switcher are fairly small in cost. I think that was roughly around $100,000 or so. The transformers are significantly more. Currently, right now, there's a circuit switcher there as well. A lot of that equipment was purchased. The serial number for the transformer is 1980. So that was back in the day when the 12 kV loop was actually part of our transmission was 12 kV around the greater Holland area. And then in 1980, we installed the 138 loop and then grew from there. So this transformer has some age on it. We've been sticking some repairs into it and just found that it's time to replace that transformer. So this recommendation is basically the conversation around that. We went out for proposals from 3 different vendors, received back good proposals. Virginia Transformer in this case was the lowest cost and also the best lead time. Virginia Transformer has provided the transformers for East Point before, so it's not a new vendor for us at all by any stretch. Total cost of that transformer with the Virginia Transformer is $2,051,695 for the cost of that transformer. Along with that, we put in some contingency in case we run into something for that transformer. The total budgeted cost for this whole project is estimated at $3 million. And along with the transformer, we're going to install oil containment. So in case that transformer would have an oil leak someday, that would go into an oil containment. Today, that transformer does not have any oil containment around it. But just the recommendation that you have before you this afternoon is just the transformer replacement itself. Any questions?
Well, the lead times look a lot better than they were for a little while.
Yes. Lead time. Virginia Transformer, even before Virginia Transformer had a fantastic lead time as well. But yeah, you see the one vendor on there had a significantly longer lead time of Q2 of 2029.
How does this pricing compare to when we were looking at a new substation for LG? Is this in line with that, or is there?
Prices are not going down. Prices has come up just a little bit, but I would say comparatively to all vendors and with our distribution transformers, they're in line. One could argue that transformer costs are out of line, but comparatively they're in line.
Those were 3 transformers, and they were priced, I think, $2.3 million a piece for a total contract price of $6.9. But they were bigger transformers than what these are as well. So, like Steve's point, this is not necessarily indicating a softening of that market. It's still very strong.
Right.
Yeah. And especially the higher voltage input ones, because again, if you look at data center build-outs, other large manufacturing build-outs, this is the size, this is the type of transformer that is really kind of, getting that aggressive marketplace. Things that are at the 138 kV level, is generally the voltage level where you're seeing some services to the very large facilities, and so there's still a lot of pressure on these type of devices.
And there's a limited number of manufacturers that manufacture transformers of this size. You start losing some of the competition just because of the size of the transformer. The weight of this transformer is around 180,000 pounds when it's fully dressed out.
Thank you.
So is the oil containment part of this?
Not part of this recommendation today. No, it is not. This is just the transformer procurement itself.
But it is in the budget number.
But
so the $3 million contemplates it this is part of that $3 million budget. There'll be a separate activity in creating the actual containment structure.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Steve, if I could get you to talk about the suppliers again, noting that they're all US-based. Is it feasible to source this type of equipment outside the United States?
It is feasible. Going back to when the Holland Energy Park was built, those transformers were a Siemens transformer coming out of Bogota back in the day. That does happen. It depends on the quantity of, and in that case, for the Holland Energy Park, there were 3 transformers. So you can start capitalizing on transportation. Then at that point, they can get them all on one ship. It starts to become more lucrative to go overseas. But historically, just looking at the market, what it's looking like, we use Theka Engineering for the engineering of a lot of these bigger projects like this, and Theka didn't think it was favorable to go overseas.
Any other questions for Steve?
Are any of these vendors ones that we've struggled with in the past on when we procured some of the substation for LG?
There wasn't a struggle, I should say. You know, the issue was we had some disagreements with regard to the cancellation provision and how much was owed at various steps of the cancellation for convenience that the owner had available to them. And so there's been some work here to make sure that there's clarity on that with Virginia Transformer, because it is the same source there. So, you know, we expect that to be not an issue. Now, number one, we also don't expect to be in a situation where we'd be canceling because we're using it for our own purposes as opposed to for the development.
Correct.
You know, but making sure that we have all that tidied up. You will note in here that the recommendation is still pending approval as to form by the city attorney's office. So there are a couple things that are going back and forth there with Virginia Transformer, but I think we feel like we're kind of nearing the finish line on that. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. I think we just have to touch up the contract itself, but I think Vince is ready to.
And then remember, on that particular case, we didn't have to resolve anything finally with them because we essentially assigned that contract to LG for them to administer the final resolution of whatever was going to be determined to be the outcome of that. And so,
Is that resolved?
from what we understand, it is not resolved yet, but it doesn't seem to be. It's almost like a more of a lack of engagement than it is an issue of continued posturing or any sort of major, confrontation around it. So,
But we don't think this order will be affected by that
no,
in any way?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Would the board like to take action on the recommendation?
Motion to approve the contract for the James Street, motion to approve the contract with, for the James Street Substation Transformer Replacement, contract with Virginia Transformer per the terms stated.
Support.
That's a motion by Maloof, supported by Engbergs. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next item, 6B, is an request for an amendment to unit number 7, major inspection. This is a very big project, and I know Grant Coster is going to come up here and speak to this in a lot more detail in terms of what's going on with it, but I think it's important to also understand this was an original piece of equipment back to 1992, and so just because it's a peaking unit, they don't run that often, they don't start that often, doesn't mean that they're not that old. They're still older, and you get to a certain point based upon run hours or starts, you get to these major intervals of maintenance, and this is the first time and probably the only time in the life of this asset that we're going to have a major inspection. And so when you look at it in that context, you can understand when you're really diving deeply into something why the costs are both large and then sometimes unknown because you're not sure what you're going to get into before you do. And that's one of these cases here that we didn't know everything and had some assumptions that turned out that we had a little bit more work to do than what we had really anticipated. So Grant, I'll turn it over to you with more details on that.
All right, thanks Dave for laying that groundwork. Good evening. Yeah, like Dave said, excuse me, the unit is original installed in 1992. First major on it, first field rewind on the generator. Some time ago, a contract was approved for Allied Power Group to do that work. This outage started back in November of 2025. Unit's been torn apart since then. A lot of components got some field inspections, sent off to the shop, and further inspections there. As with what happens in these outages, just because of the timing of that discovery portion, having to get onto the repairs quickly, otherwise you start pushing back that end date further and further, which impacts capacity and a lot of other things. Several change orders came through that we worked with Joel and Dave to decide that they needed to get approved at that moment to continue the project. And unfortunately, during that process, we did go over the approved contingency. So this recommendation is to increase that contingency. So to give you some details on those change orders we did approve during that time period, there were 4 change orders approved. The first one was in the amount of $177,476. That was for 2 main reasons. The rotor was expected to stay on site and remove all the blades on site. However, during that process, there was too much corrosion on the blades and rotor, and they couldn't be removed on site. And so the vendor recommended that get shipped to their shop. I believe that shop is down in Houston. And from there, they could get it up on different stands and do some different, use some different maintenance methods to remove those blades that you can't necessarily do on site. So that was part of it, as well as, like I said, the generator field was getting rewound. That went to a generator shop in New York. And once they tore that apart, they found several components that needed to get fixed that we weren't necessarily expecting. So those were the 2 things feeding into that change order. Change order number 2 had 3 main things feeding into that one. That change order was $1,028,558. Stage 1 and 2 buckets, that's the blades on the turbine rotor for the first 2 stages, had to get replaced. That's because stage 1, something that we weren't aware of at the time going into this project, was replaced, I think in 2011 during a hot gas path inspection, if I got my dates right, and it was replaced with a non-OEM design bucket. And we went to, and unfortunately, who owned that design, that company has been bought a time or 2 since then, so they didn't really have the design specs from that bucket. Allied Power Group doesn't have the design specs, so they couldn't confidently make the repairs necessary and put it back in the unit and give us the good to go to run. So we decided the best route to take was just to replace those buckets with a standard design bucket. So that way we don't run into this issue in the future if we ever have to address repairs to those buckets again. And stage 2 buckets also were recommended to replace due to a technical information letter from GE basically stating that there's expected life in those buckets, and after it hits that, they should be replaced due to concerns of reliability. So these buckets had to hit that life expectancy. So we decided to replace those. And the third thing was also going through this process of inspecting the turbine buckets and rotor. It was discovered that there's damage done to they call it the disc of the rotor. So that rotor isn't a solid piece, it's actually made up of discs. So when they tore it apart, found different damage to that disc on the second stage and recommended that get replaced because it couldn't be repaired. So again, that's fed into change order number 2. Change order number 3 was in the amount of $414,367.80. That was due to heavy repairs needed on combustion components as well as generator bearings. Change order 4 was in the amount of $195,855. Again, the rotor went off site for further inspections and to get torn apart. While there, it It was found that the compressor rotor was in very rough shape, a lot of corrosion on it, and the recommendation was to de-stack, or again, that rotor's made up of a lot of different discs bolted together. So the recommendation was to thoroughly clean that corrosion, was to de-stack or take those different discs apart, so that way they can again thoroughly clean it. And so that cost there was for the de-stacking, the cleaning and restacking of the compressor. That was change order number 4. And the contractor, Allied Power Group, estimated that there may be upwards of $100,000 in additional repairs once they de-stack that. Maybe they find some other stuff. And so that's, if you look at the board package, that's why we have a change order 5 estimate. That's not something that's been approved at this time, but just something we're trying to include in this new contingency amount. So, so total change order amount that's been approved to date is $1,716,256.80. So, the original contract with Allied Power Group was $2,728,650, and the contingency that was approved was $871,350. Again, like Dave mentioned earlier, these numbers were based off years of inspections that only see a small portion of the turbine, and once you start tearing it apart, you start seeing a lot of stuff you weren't aware of that was going to have to get addressed. So, let me see. So adding these change orders would bring the total spent on the project at $4,524,611.80. We are asking for the additional contingency of $100,388.20 to be added to that contingency, which would bring the new project total to $4,625,000. And in addition to some of the comments Dave made, I just want to also reiterate, I know it's been mentioned a couple times, but these units, before we dispatch them, before we schedule them work, there is an analysis done that we look at the possible cost savings in operating the units instead of buying that power. And in that analysis, we do account for these maintenance costs, for other expenses based on starts, based on how long the unit's running. So we do account for that every time we start the unit. So we've kind of been planning for this for years, as well as the ROI on this expense is still about 2 years, because the capacity value on this unit is about $2.5 million a year. So it is a lot of money, but we have tried our best to plan for this every time we start up the unit. So,
Yeah, so maybe just to, again, what Grant's talking about there on the ROI, the capacity value is, again, that resource adequacy requirement that we have to meet as a utility. We either have to have it under ownership or under contract, and if you have to go out and procure it, given the market conditions for capacity today, the value or the amount of capacity this unit can produce has a value that's greater than $2.5 million a day. There's also other value streams that come from this unit, such as the avoidance of transmission that we would have to buy to bring power into the city, and also the fact that we're dealing with a lot of times an operating cost when we do run it less than the market. So if it wasn't here, we're actually paying a higher cost for the actual energy as well. Those aren't even factored in when we look at the ROI. It's really just on that resource adequacy piece. So while it seems like an expensive project, and it is an expensive project, it also is one of those that we know we're going to have when we reach this major inspection, and that's why we plan for it in the determination of whether we're going to run. We're making sure that incrementally every time we run, we're capturing a little bit of that value towards that maintenance interval, or we're not going to run it. And so that's part of that decision-making process. It's not just on energy only that we're making the decision to run. We're also making sure that we're covering these incremental maintenance costs that come from every start. And so we kind of already have planned this in a way we've financially sort of accumulated the funds for this project.
Would this be a unit that, for some reason or other, we would replace at some point in time? Would we replace it with a similar unit, or would we do something totally different?
You gonna go for that, or you want?
The last couple IRPs that I've read through have shown that keeping these units available and running is advantageous for us. It's hard to speak for the next 5 years given the current regulations and
Yeah, no, I
all the
think
rest of it, but
I think this is going to be an asset for us for quite some time yet. I don't think this has any but I do think when you look at replacement in the future, we are evaluating as part of the IRP capacity resources, even if they don't run a lot. So we're actually looking at this type of unit. We're also looking at reciprocating internal combustion engines. Both of them have their pros and cons. And the other thing is, as far as a capacity resource, obviously we also have an RFP on the street for battery energy storage systems as well. So, I mean, all of those things can play a role in that capacity. I will tell you that buying a combustion turbine today, again, back to the demand for energy, is about a 5-year waiting list right now. So, maintaining these and keeping these in working order versus buying something new is very important from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Grant? Could we have action on the recommendation? Please.
Recommend approving an increase of the Allied Power Group Unit 7 major inspection contract contingency in the amount of $1,025,000 for an overall contract and contingency total of $4.625 million.
Second.
Motion by Enberg, second by Lilly. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Grant.
Grant.
All right, next item, item 6C is again part of a bigger project. Talked a little bit about this on the major project summary tonight, but at our water reclamation facility, we are working on improvements to our disinfection systems. And one of those things was a decision to move in the direction of ultraviolet as opposed to chemical treatment. And so tonight, Alex Craigmile, our planning engineers, is here to take us through a recommendation associated with the procurement of that UV equipment. So Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Dave. So yeah, we started this over 2 years ago with a preliminary study done to look at UV disinfection as an alternative to chemical disinfection, which we do today. About a little over a year ago, we came back and asked a recommendation to get Donahue to start doing the engineering design for this as we kind of move towards construction. Last year, around this time, we actually went out for an RFP to look at equipment vendors for UV to see what was out there, see what the price points were, kind of the maintenance costs, the running costs, do a total life cycle cost analysis of it, along with doing some site visits to a few different municipalities around to see what they have for working and if they like their products or not. And with that, we did an RFP. We came back with 3 vendors that provided proposals back, with Trojan being the recommended by life cycle costs and also with kind of that maintenance, and it actually ended up also having a lower lead time. So with that, Donahue began designing around kind of that recommended practice while we had a vendor under contract or agreement with a price. Now, fast forward a year later, we're getting ready to bid out for the actual construction of it here in another few months. But Trojan came back to us with a potential cost increase moving forward if they weren't able to hold past the end of February. With that and the slated lead time kind of lining up better with when we bid this to the GCs and they actually start construction to kind of cut some of that lead time off, we decided to bring it tonight to make a recommendation to advance procure it. So a couple of things with that. We've done one of these projects in the past. In 2015, we did advanced procurement with some equipment that we then assigned to the GC during construction or after they were under contract. So talking with the city attorney's office, we've tweaked kind of our standard contract language. Trojan's agreed to it. We're still negotiating a little bit of the smaller details at this point. But to have the assignment clause modified to state that, so they're, as part of this agreement, would be explicitly agreeing to, we're entering into this contract with the understanding that as soon as we have a GC, we would be assigning it to them. and then they would be taking it through to completion. So it kind of helps mitigate some of our risks and go on from there. So, any questions?
The energy consumption seems to be quite different.
It is.
What could be the reasons for that?
So that's one of the things we looked at, and there's not really a great reason. Some of the thoughts from Donahue and some of the other engineers that we talked to. So each of these manufacturers is basing it off of their testing and data to show that they can meet the minimum requirements. So Trojan has a lot of invested into testing, and they have their own testing facility. So the thought is that they're a little less conservative in terms of the number of bulbs that they physically need to meet those requirements. And some of the electrical usage and panels that they have are a little bit less than what Veolia was showing in their proposal. But there's not really a clear indicator. It's provided straight from them, from their data of what they're going to need to use. So it's interesting that it is so different.
Yeah, in that process is the amount of dwell time an issue as opposed to the number of lights that they have? I'm not sure what the power of the system comes from.
Yeah, so it's if you can imagine a channel as it's passing through, it's the number of physical lights that are in each unit as it's passing by, and the number of physical units, which is based off of flow. There's actually an intensity to the light that can be adjusted dependent on the sensors and how the data is run. So that all kind of factors into it.
So our flow capability is not going to be diminished by this process,
No.
maybe enhanced? Or
So yeah, two things with that. It's going to be enhanced a little bit, but the other thing that we've done as part of this design process or working on doing is the channel itself. There's a lot of concrete costs. There'll be a physical building that goes over top of it. So for long-term planning, there'll be an extra bay for future lighting equipment to go in to increase that, so that we'll have to come back down the road and ask for additional equipment, but the main cost of the building, we won't be adding on at that point. We'll just be kind of modifying what's there to minimize those additional costs down the line. But it does eliminate a little bit of a pinch point there, and it moves it to a different part of the plant system.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Alex? Could we have action on the recommendation?
I move that we approve the equipment procurement agreement with Trojan in the amount of $999,720 with a 10% contingency of $99,972 for a total of $1,099,692 pending approval as to form from the city attorney.
Support. Motion's by Lily, supported by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. All right. 6D is a very exciting one to be with you, to be able to share with you tonight, and also want to recognize in the audience here Bernie Merkel from Coldwell Banker Woodland Schmidt. Bernie has helped us out tremendously as it relates to the marketing of property at Hillside Trail. I've got a little PowerPoint I think that Becky's going to bring up that'll help me kind of through the little bit of the history and the contents of the recommendation tonight. So as we're talking about here, and you can see on the title of this slide deck, we're talking about a portion of Hillside Trail, right? So just a reminder that the history of this site was that the area on Lake Michigan and Laketown Township that's really in question here is just under 24 acres in size with about 325 feet of frontage, but it is, as I'll show in the pictures here in a little bit, it's a flag lot kind of setup where there's a smaller width at the lakefront and a much wider area at the back. We purchased that back in 2001 for a little over $1.4 million, and the reason we did was to provide a secondary access point to Lake Michigan south of the channel, so on the south side. The thought was that we would never really probably build a water plant on that site. The topography is very challenging, and it's dune area and things like that. But it could provide the impetus either for a property swap or, potentially, as we're going to be talking about tonight, still leaving the ability to create access from a water intake perspective, even if you're building a water plant much further inland. And so as we've talked about that site and thought about that site, we also recognize the fact that there's a lot of ongoing obligations associated with that. You can see in the picture here an A-frame that is part of the original family cottage from the Rosenberg family, which we bought the property from back in 2001. It has not been lived in. It's not been maintained as a residence. And so weather and time takes its toll on that. And so it's a structure that is going to need care, and it also is a structure that's important from a grandfathering situation as it relates to setbacks and other issues as well, right? So you just don't want to take it down and then lose some of those situations. The other thing is that we're paying property taxes, and you might say, well, you're a utility, municipal utility, why would that be the case? Again, even though we're a utility, if we're holding property but not using it for a utility purpose, then that's not something that creates a tax exempt situation as it relates to the property taxes. And so there's an ongoing situation where annually there's a cost associated with that. And then finally, if anybody's driven up that way, you know that there's a private road, a little more challenging in the wintertime, I would say. So something you want to sort of get ready for that drive if you're going to do in the wintertime, and make sure you're all set there, because it is a little chilling at times to look over the hillside as you're going up that drive. But that road also then needs to have maintenance activities with it, and there's costs involved with maintaining our portion of the responsibility associated with that road. And so this was all discussed with the board and with city council really back. Well, here, before I get into that, here's the survey, give you a better picture of that, right? So you can see now, here's the property, that flag lot. You can see with the smaller area at the waterfront, there are adjacent property owners. This is important to tonight's discussion. There are adjacent property owners in that southern notch of that area that's along the lakefront, and then you've got that wider piece in the back. Here, also on the survey, you can see the road as it's coming in, kind of goes north of the property and then back into the property again and across to be able to give easement access to get to the other adjacent property owners' structures, south of our facility. Ultimately, that ties back into 141st Avenue, which is a public road at that point. So again, as we talked about this with the board and council, really through 2021, 2022 timeframe, we kind of came to the opinion that, in order to maintain access, we don't have to continue to own the whole parcel. We can maintain an easement, maintain some space for a pumping facility, maybe to bring that water back further inland, as opposed to a treatment facility there, as opposed to having something that is the entire parcel. And so a resolution was passed by both the board and city council back in 2022 to place in front of the voters ballot language that would pass authority and responsibility and decision-making around the disposition of this property back to the board and to city council. We had to do this because under the charter provisions here in different sections of the charter, 4.17 and 12.19, there are prohibitions on selling real estate owned by the utility without a 3/5 vote of the public. And so when this ballot language was presented to the voters and they voted in November, we were pleased to see that 67%, which I think is a very strong number, frankly, in a ballot proposition, voted in favor of allowing the board and council to really the decision-making associated with how best to get rid of the property. But also, what's also clear in here is that the proceeds of this go to benefit the water utility customers as well. So that's another important element of that ballot language. So in marketing this over a number of months and over a couple of years, frankly, we did have some individuals that came forward looking for the property on the waterfront, and that was the main, I think, interest. What we did see is that there was not a lot of interest, I think, in the back portion for those that were buying the waterfront. It didn't incrementally mean a lot. That being said, we did find that there's an opportunity for adjacent property owners where there's value to them, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit. So the good news is what that allowed us to do is to have a proposal that came to us for a purchase and sale agreement to essentially take that flag portion, that back area behind the adjacent property owners, off the table and transfer that to a couple of the owners along the lakefront for about a $400,000 price. And so when we evaluate the potential for entities to own that, given the topography of the site, given what it means in terms of the total site makeup, we think this is a very good outcome for that portion, because now it'll allow us, provided everything goes through on this contingent sale, it'll allow us to actually market the remainder of that property and not really lose much from a market evaluation standpoint for those that are interested in the waterfront, but still garner some value for that flag portion of it, maximizing the impact. So the partial sale that you have in front of you tonight, again, is for that $400,000, but it has contingencies in it. One of the contingencies is that we're going to talk about some lot splits here. And a couple of those lot splits end up being boundary extensions for a couple of the property owners. And then also, there was some very old language in the deed of this property that put some pretty interesting requirements and also authorizations in place. One was sort of deed of recreational use for the property owners on that back area of the property. So when you look at selling to somebody, you're selling a piece of property that has an ability for somebody to sort of use a portion of that back for some recreational activities. It also has prohibitions on things like public enjoyment, general, like creating a park and things like that. So there were a number of things in that covenant agreement and in the easement that we wanted to make sure that we took care of as we walked through this. And we were able to do that, and as part of this proposal, in going to the closing of this, it's contemplated that at closing, and required really at closing, that all the parties affected by that language would sign an amended and restated easement, which is providing that access, but also a restated and amended covenant agreement, redefining some of the language that goes into the warranty deed. So let me get into some more specifics here on the lot split. So as proposed in the purchase and sale agreement, this is what would remain as really kind of 4 splits to that parcel. You can see the boundary extensions in blue. There are 2 participating property owners along Lake Michigan that are essentially paying each $200,000 towards the $400,000 sale. They are the northernmost and the southernmost property owner. The middle one is not participating in the purchase, but glad to know that the middle property owner has signed on to this paperwork that is in the attachment, because they have committed to dealing with the restated amendment, or the access easement, and the restated and amended covenants as well. So good news is that even though they're not participating in the actual purchase, they are party to the overall clearing of that warranty deed language as well. You also see a line kind of meandering through on the green here, dividing what's contemplated as utility property from lakefront property. That is not necessarily the dividing line that will remain. That is really kind of our discretion in discussions with Laketown Township to decide what we're going to reserve for a pump house down the road to the east end of the property, and what gets marketed as lakefront property later on. And so what we need to deal with at Laketown Township is, what's the required amount of road frontage that we need to have for a parcel split? What's the required amount of acreage we need to have for a parcel split? And so those are the things that, frankly, we need to be able to deal with in terms of defining that dividing line. What we are thinking in the long term, again, is that, and we've talked about this really all along, is that we would maintain a 50-foot easement along the northern edge of whatever remains as lakefront property, and then we would remain the owner of whatever ends up being utility property, so wherever that dividing line is. Now, utility property isn't going to be waterfront at that point, and therefore is going to have a much lower value than what it is going to be on waterfront. So again, as far as tax burden is concerned, we still might have some tax burden, but that tax burden is going to be greatly diminished based upon owning non-waterfront property and essentially vacant, undeveloped property acreage as opposed to developed, lakefront property parcel. So this is what's contemplated in terms of the parcel splits, and would have to be approved ultimately by Lake Town Township as part of the process once we get through the approvals. So again, coming back, why a partial sale? This, we believe, as staff, maximizes the potential sales proceeds, and I think Bernie would probably concur with that, would maximize the potential sales proceeds and the totality of the property to do it this way. It also cleans up deed restrictions to the benefits really of all parties, and it prepares the remaining site for the marketing of the waterfront piece, right? So let's talk about each of those new amended and restated documents that are included in your packet. The easement is really just as you might think. It's providing that driveway access so that the owners of waterfront or lakefront property can continue to utilize that to get to their parcels. They have that ability as long as they are committing to taking care of the maintenance of the road on a pro rata basis. So now again, that's for the beachfront owners or the lakefront owners. So the utility property would not be in that situation. However, we still own the lakefront and the utility property because we haven't split it and sold the lakefront yet. So if something were to occur before we were able to sell that, we would be responsible as well for part of that work that had to be done. But it provides for the easement of utilities and for the driveway to get to those properties. It also grants the BPW the right to use the driveway really post the sale of the beachfront property, if we need to access it. And that is in the means of construction of a water line down the road for access to Lake Michigan, or otherwise maintaining what we would put in, provided that if we bring in heavy equipment and cause damage to it, we obviously are responsible for fixing whatever we cause there. And that's a really straightforward, I think, a reasonable provision. In the amended and restated restricted covenant, this is what's getting into what you can use the land for and not use land. So it takes out some of those terms from 1963, which were talking about kind of everybody's ability to use that back area, and gets rid of all that. It restates it based on really very straightforward provisions here, and that is it restricts the use of the property. You can't use as a public or private park. You also can't use it for commercial purposes, and I'll come back to that in a little bit because that might go, that might be a problem, or as an accessory there too. It also provides for lot division restrictions, so basically saying that in order to divide these properties up anymore, there are certain widths requirements and things like that that are called for in there. It also dictates how close to the property lines a structure might be able to be. Even if you could get a variance, you still are restricted based upon some of this language. It also then provides an ability for each residence along that lakefront to build up to one guest cabin for guests and essentially family members. It's really kind of called out not to be more of a structure for anybody to use, but really for guests of that residence. It does allow, and again, we don't know where Lake Town Township's going to go with short-term rental, so they would be obviously more restrictive if they ban short-term rentals than what this provision allows for. But if short-term rentals would continue to be allowed in Lake Town Township, then this restricts the short-term rental to no more than 4 weeks per year. And so again, that's to provide, I think, the right mix of not scaring away a potential buyer for the lakefront property that remains, but also providing enough flexibility that if that lakefront property buyer was buying something with the idea that maybe they get a little bit of time to be able to do that would be allowed. But again, Lake Town Township might have something even more restrictive, and this is going to be, whatever that is going to dictate over some of these provisions here. We can't dictate through that, through these provisions, what happens there. And then going back to that commercial use, this is where the exception at the bottom is coming in. That's important, is that the BPW utility property, that stuff that's to the east end there, all those provisions related to that commercial use, and that's going to be accepted, out for that property. It allows for utility uses, including but not limited to water extraction, any other functions related to that, parking, all those different things that would go on associated with actually creating a pump house there. It also does that same sort of exclusion for the easement. So the easement that we would create, and there's really no definition in this purchase and sale agreement in terms of the width of that easement, even though we're contemplating 50 foot. We have the ability to sort of shape that based upon, what we end up needing there, and it's not going to be restricted by this provision. And then if in the future we decide that we never are going to build a water plant on the south side, and you have this utility property that you want to turn into residential, that's also allowed in this. And you could provide up to 4 residential dwellings here. Again, topography might say something different. It might be difficult to actually do that. But if you could do that, this would be allowed, provided that all of those provisions that are identified for the beachfront owners and the other residences would apply to those residential properties at that time. And you could provide for up to 4 residential structures that would have Lake Michigan access. And you could provide for that access provided it was more than 100 feet north of the adjacent, the southernmost or the northernmost adjacent property owner's property. So essentially, these are the restrictions that are being put back into this through the terms and conditions. And I, again, feel this is a very good outcome for us to be able to preserve that property, for being able to stick that in a pipe into the lake sometime in the future if we needed to do that. So again, going back to this division based upon everything that I just said. So in that green area, that's utility property, so that would be accepted from that deed restriction. And again, that line will probably change. We'll back it up probably more to the east a little bit based upon what we actually need to create an adequate lot split and the road frontage. But everything else then that's part of that covenant would be for the lakefront parcels. So our lakefront property and those adjacent property owners would all apply to them. So, the next steps, if approved tonight, then we would be updating a survey. We would be engaging with Laketown Township over a final, over the lot splits, including a final division of where lakefront and utility property are going to be. And we would close and execute the amended, close on the property, and when we close, we would execute the amended easement and amended restrictive covenant. And then after that time, we're talking about letting the existing listing expire, basically, and we would come back with a whole new listing at that point because it's been out there for a long time, and to not have confusion about it, it'd be good just to get it cleaned up, get a fresh listing out there, and have that be what's left in terms of the lakefront property and market it as that, hopefully later this spring, so that we could get into that when people are actively starting to come out and take a look at those type of properties. So I don't know if that helped, sort of, that's the end of the presentation, so Becky, you can get out of there. Bernie, anything, is there anything that I maybe missed or you want to characterize in terms of the marketing of the property that I could have covered differently or better?
I'm hesitant to add. You did a great job. So, no, I think you've covered it all. I will say there has been activity in the lakefront property itself, but to Dave's point, I think at the beginning, they have not. They don't see the value in the rest of the land because of the topography. So this feels like a good solution to our problem here. So, any questions for me specifically? Or?
Yeah, any questions for either Bernie or for me?
Did you say that the other lots that will be created for the 2 residents that are there, will those be buildable at that kind of level, based upon whatever?
Go ahead.
Only for a guest, possibly for a guest cabin. They could, but the topography really doesn't allow for much back there. And I think they probably have the room for that.
I think that's the case. I think if you look at what they have right now, they probably have it in their existing area right now. But if you start going further back to the east, that topography gets very, very challenging back there. And so tough to create the access roads that would be needed at the grade, you know, so, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions anybody has? And this will go on to city council. Any property sale or purchase is something. And then again, these amended and restated agreements at close would be something that the mayor and clerk would be signing as opposed to the general manager signing those, so.
I guess I would like to thank you, Dave, you and Randy and Vince for all your hard work. This has been a challenge.
It's a puzzle, a little bit of a puzzle.
It is a puzzle.
Just
so.
like you see the puzzle on the map there, it's been a little bit of a puzzle to put together. But yeah, I want to thank Bernie too. I mean, it's been a very great process. It's been a while that we've been at this, and I think this is the piece that has been. I mean, even for I think the language related to the cleaning up the deed restrictions have been probably about 11, 12 months in the workings that we've been doing that. And so, again, I also want to thank the adjacent property owners for sticking with the process as well. I mean, I think this does benefit everybody, right? I think this is a good outcome for everybody in terms of what it means for the language, what it opens up in terms of opportunities for them, in terms of a guest cabin and things like that. But I also think it cleans up some maybe some concerns even as it relates to, you know, what if it was a state park at some point and somebody tried to resolve the deed restrictions that were there, you know, through eminent domain or something like that. So it's a direction we're heading that's different from that, and I think ultimately that's good for us. It's good for the adjacent property owners. I think ultimately it's good for what we end up doing with regard to the lakefront property. It is going to be important, and the other thing I would mention is it does get in front of Lake Town Township, and there are some things in the lot splits that will be non-conforming, but it's not inconsistent with what you see otherwise along the lakefront. And it's also something that we've had conversations with Lake Town in the past, but note that there have been changes both at board level and at manager level, and so we're going to have to re-engage in that process. But no sense doing a lot of that lifting if it's not getting through the approval process here, but that's one of the first steps after we do that.
Is there actually road frontage at the east end of the utility property on 141?
It is.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. Yeah, and we believe we have the road frontage we need.
Yeah,
there.
you can barely see it if you go back
It's
to
not
that.
much, but
yeah,
yeah.
see that little diagonal going through there, Paul, on the
Yep.
very right side. There you go, right there.
Yep.
Yep. So we think
What's the current listing of the property value?
3.95.
And so if we take 400,000 off that, you're call it 3.5.
Yep.
What do you think the value is of just the waterfront portion?
we haven't
I-
discussed
I-
we haven't
you tell me if
discussed
you want
that
me
at
to
that.
talk about
yeah.
that.
I think we're. I was going to say priceless is what I was going to say, Kyle, on that.
I
Is there an initial target of what?
I
Yeah.
would tell you that
Depending where
we're
we
going to
play.
get closer to what we've had. We've had some interested parties, and I think Dave could maybe talk
Yeah.
about that at some point. But this gets us closer to that number for
Yeah,
sure.
I think we're going to be able to get closer to our goals that we've had, based upon carving this with this strategy. Yeah,
While still maintaining.
yeah, with still maintaining the access and the ability for the pump house to be built in the future.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, again, everything's far enough away from that buildable site that everybody feels comfortable with that. It's just when you come in there if you drive up there, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think the neighbors would like to see us. They would like to improve the road after we sell that.
That's right.
That property, so that the cement trucks and everything can get out of there, and then they'll redo the road. So we'll deal with that with the next buyer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Could we have a motion on the purchase and sale agreements?
I'd make a recommendation that we approve the purchase and sale agreements along with Amendment 1 and the restated amendment easements and restricted covenants attached to the proposal, which will be done and then approved through the city council and attorney's office.
Support. It's a motion by Lily, supported by Lynn. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Any other business?
We have no other business tonight, so I can move on to item 8 if you'd like.
Please.
All right, communications to the general manager tonight. I have a few things on the list here. First of all, our customer survey is out on the street. Was actually launched today on a soft launch, they call it. So about 10% of our customers got the request for them to fill out a survey today, and that's just to make sure everything's going smoothly from the way it goes out into the system, and everything is looking good as far as that goes. But they'll raise that up and continue to solicit more feedback as we move along through that process. Again, we generally bring that back for the April study session, so it'll be about that time frame again this year that you'll see the results of that coming in. Also, this Wednesday, City Council has a study session, and one of the topics, I think first on the agenda, right, first on the agenda is a presentation of the recommendations from the Community Energy Plan Strategic Development Team. And so all the members of the Strategic Development Team have been invited to attend that. They don't have to present, but they certainly are welcome to attend, and if there's any comments or questions that come back, I'm sure that they can help field those as well. Really good process, I think, again, that we went through with the group, and have some new strategies that were involved with each of the 5 levers on that. So anybody else wants to visit for that Wednesday night, that's what's going on there. Also mentioning that we have our next public open house at Holland Energy Park scheduled for February 27, which is a Friday, and March 1, which is a Monday. We try to do that to align with Holland Public Schools' winter break that they have, so that families with kids that are on break can get a chance to come down and see the visitor center as well. So that's going to be available on those 2 days. And then finally, as a reminder, we have on your SharePoint site, but again, please reach out if you have any questions about registering. The Michigan Public Power Agency has its annual stakeholder meeting on May 14 at the Frederick Meyer Gardens, and 2 really good external speakers, and of course our CEO of MPPA are speaking that day. So encourage you to, if your schedule allows, to sign up for that and enjoy an afternoon. That's an afternoon event on May 14 at Frederick Meyer Gardens. Our next meeting is on 2 weeks from today, on February 23 at 4 p.m. And again, that'll be back at 49 West 3rd Street, which is the facility adjacent to the water reclamation facility. It is a study session, and our study session topics this month, in addition to our January financials being presented, will be our wastewater utility issues. So our 4th utility that we've been talking about here for the last few months. So we've had electric, broadband, water, and now we'll talk about wastewater this month. And also we'll be giving a high-level overview of the proposed budget is our plan. And between now and then, our budget subcommittee is planning on meeting at least 1 time, maybe 2 times, to go over the staff's proposed budget in a little bit more detail. And then my final thing tonight is just want to give and recognize a well-deserved, or give a congratulations to PJ Thompson on a well-deserved recognition from Lakeshore Advantage. For those of you that may not know, on the 29th of January at its annual meeting, PJ was named a recipient of the organization's Visionary Award, and that award recognized leaders who demonstrate bold leadership, create impact beyond their formal roles, bring stakeholders together to achieve meaningful long-term outcomes for our community. And if you think about what PJ does in addition to his formal role, his service to our board and his leadership here, his work on the strategic development team, his work with the Holland Community Foundation and their investment committee, and then also being a leader of Lakeshore Advantage's Powering Our Future campaign, which is a very successful campaign to help Lakeshore Advantage in all the work that it needs to do in service to our community through the primary manufacturers that we have. And that's just a few of the ways that PJ supports our community. So PJ, congratulations on that award.
Thank you. It's getting kind of warm in here.
That's all I have today.
Thanks. Any communications from the board? Motion to adjourn?
Like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Motion by Lilly, seconded.
Support.
Supported by Ed Bergs. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks.